we're going to try something that's really random. And we're going to start with some gesso. And I'm actually going to lay this on pretty thick. And as I finish laying down a layer, I'm going to press a sheet of text into it. And then I'm going to move on to the next section. And apply some more text. You can do this with gesso, or you can do it with liquid matte medium. I'm doing it with gesso because my background is cardboard, and so I'm actually base coating the cardboard while I'm applying my text. And if your page curls up at all, you can just apply a little more gesso and lay it down. And now we're going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and make some magic happen. I let this dry about 20 minutes, and now I'm just going to pull at it. And pull away anything that's loose. And then from there, got a little bit of water in this. Just gonna sort of peel off anything that I can get to pull off. And I let this dry for 20 minutes, which might have been a little bit long for this paper. But you can experiment with the paper that you're going to use and just kind of see what happens. And sometimes, if you do this when it's very wet, you end up pulling off a lot of paper. When it's dry like this, you end up pulling off just a little. This is almost like doing a transfer, but not quite. The goal here isn't really to transfer the text, although you could certainly use this as a transfer technique by getting this very wet and rolling it off. Probably not on a cardboard surface, because I don't want to get it real wet and have the cardboard warp, but on a canvas panel or even on a piece of watercolor paper. You could definitely press text pages into gesso, let it dry, and then apply water the way I am, and get it very damp, and roll off the top layer so that just the text is left behind. I think though you'll end up with mirror image text if you do that. Your text will be reversed because you'll be looking at the back side of the ink. This is a really nice sort of distressed look, If I was going to keep going with this, I'd probably go with my next layer as a glaze in sort of an earth tone. So why don't I let this dry a little bit and then come back and do that, and you can take a look at it and see if you like it. So, and I could also keep going with this. Oh, this is getting loose. That's good. I could keep going with the water, keep dampening it to see if I can get some more of this off. But I don't think I want to peel too much off. Like I said, I don't want to work too wet on cardboard. But on a hard surface, or on a like watercolor paper or mixed media paper, it might not be so bad. So let me let this dry, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like with the layer of glaze on it. So I was a little impatient, so I just gave this a quick blast with my heat gun, and now it's relatively dry. It's a little damp in places, and I have a container of golden burnt umber glaze, which is a nice sort of neutral brown. I'm going to go a little heavier along the edges where there's more gesso. And I'm not going to do any in the center because I really like the color of this paper as it is. So I'm using a makeup sponge, which is my applicator of choice for most things. I don't use a lot of brushes for background work. And it helps me to blend and sort of feather my color so that I can get a lot of color in some places and then brush it out to hardly any or none. And I also like the sort of really fine texture that a sponge gives that I really can't get from a brush. So now I'm getting a really interesting background. Much more interesting than just laying a solid color of paint over the top of it. And I could still layer some paint or layer some glaze over the top of this to tone it even more if I wanted to. I actually might be inclined to, since this is cardboard, and since I've already started this sort of grunge thing, I might be inclined to peel off some of the cardboard and then go back in with some glaze. So now I've really got an interesting sort of background going. And there's nothing to say that I couldn't go back over with a little more gesso and some more text pages, or that I couldn't lay down some matte medium and slap down another page and let that dry, and then peel this off and apply some more glaze. So with one really simple technique, you're starting to build up layers and visual interest that will create ultimately a more visually interesting finished piece. So I'm going to let this dry for a second and then come back and peel off and do some more glaze. So I'm just tearing off a bit. And again, I blasted this with my heat gun because I was impatient. So you want to be careful when you're using a heat gun over any sort of acrylic products because they do blister pretty easily. And there you go. That's much more interesting than just a flat piece of cardboard. And from here I would start layering probably a focal image over the top of this, or I might do some paint work to sort of knock down this text a little bit. It's very bright. It's very visible through the glaze. And one way to make that less obtrusive is to go back in with a little gesso. And again, I'm not trying to cover the whole thing. I just want to maybe make it a little less obnoxious. So I'm sort of feathering it out from a very dense application to none. Now I'll let that layer dry and then maybe apply another glaze or another color, or do some paint over the top of it, some stenciling maybe to make it even more visually interesting. So there are a lot of different directions that you can go once you've built up this base of something more than just a solid color. So, and we're going to learn all the various things that you could do over the top of this in other lessons.